Hello guys, my name is Aditya. Today I'll be talking to you guys about astral projection. So before I even start, can I just get a show of hands of how many people have had just like regular plain old dreams before? Right? Almost everybody, right? So to start off, Susan Blackmore says that astral projection is the soul's escape from the body, not just a mystical experience, but also a measurable one. And what I like to conclude from that quote is that astral projection is sort of like your body's way of detaching its soul from your physical body and viewing it from an external viewpoint, right? So imagine there's a tether between your body and your soul, and once those two disconnect, that tether is endless. You can go anywhere back in time, anywhere you really want, right? And my research question was, to what extent do neurological and psychological factors contribute to the experience of one's unique tailored astral projection? And the significance of my research, Dr. Blank states that it's the boundary between mysticism and neuroscience is thinner than we think. And what I like to think from that is that it's his way of saying that spirituality and science are thinner than we think. They're more alike, and under certain circumstances that they're even similar, right? And the overview of astral projection is the conscious experience of leaving the physical body and observing it from an external viewpoint. And again, what I mean by that is that your body's way of detaching, and this is how you get into dreaming, lucid dreaming, and astral projection, as those are three different levels to how mysticism works, right? And some historical context beforehand is that the idea of the soul leaving the body is just as old as the belief itself. So as far as we can backtrack into time, our ancestors, our ancient rulers, they have always thought that the soul did exist, but as we moved up on in time, it's been proved, right? So as old as we can backtrack into, we kind of like to think that astral projection exists as far back in time, and from different cultural perspectives, from Hindu, Christianity, even Western front faces. So my literature overview focuses on psychological triggers, spiritual accounts and critiques, and neuroscience of the out-of-body experiences. And Blank and RG from 2005 states that the electrical stimulation of the TPJ can reliably induce the out-of-body's experience in controlled environments. And what they're saying from that is that we can electrically simulate what our temporal parietal junction is simulating while we are in the out-of-body experience, while we are astrally projecting, right? So when we are astrally projecting, or when we are dreaming, our body is in a state of paralysis, right? It's because we can't act out our dreams because our brain is constantly hallucinating, right? So when it comes to hallucination, our body sends out a message to our skeletal inhibitors, which goes on to then tell our body that we have to be in a state of paralysis because we can't act out our dreams, because when we are always hallucinating, we tend to act out, right? When you have that feeling that you're falling when you're dreaming, that is basically another way of your body shocking itself back awake, because that happens only to the point when we are falling asleep too fast and our body is concerned at the rate we're falling asleep, right? So it sends a message to our heart. It's almost like a built-in CPR thing. So it sends it, and then that's when we jolt awake, right? So we are constantly hallucinating while we are dreaming, so our body is in a set state of paralysis at all times, right? And Susan Blackmore says that what we call the soul leaving the body is a cognitive hallucination. So, like I said, we are always hallucinating when we are dreaming, whether it's daydreaming, dreaming in the nighttime, or just falling asleep in general, right? So when that goes on to the brain is a belief machine. So those hallucinations and belief machine go hand in hand, as hallucinations trigger our brain into believing what we are seeing is real, right? Because when we are sleeping, our brain, it's sort of like an internal movie system for our brain. Our brain needs to be active at all times. When it's in that set REM of stage of sleep, that's when our brain is functioning at the highest rate possible, right? That's why we're constantly hallucinating. We don't know if what we are seeing is real or not because we're asleep. We're not conscious, right? We are in the state of wakefulness and consciousness, right? So what I mean by that is our brain is aware that we are sleeping, but our body doesn't know that, which is why when we are hallucinating in our dreams, that goes to the fact that we don't know if that hallucination is real or not. right? So since we don't know if that hallucination is real, that's when it goes on to thinking that we are believing everything we are seeing in our dreams, right? And when it comes to failure, right? So many people have tried to astrally project, and that comes with experience. You can't always get it on the first try, right? So failure comes in many perspectives, whether it's failing a test in school or just failing astrally projecting, right? So it comes in many perspectives, and some people do think that they are better than others, which is why that they try to do it beforehand, but they think that their opinion is way over other people's opinion, which is why it goes to the fact that they're not doing it properly, and their opinion can be wrong sometimes, right? So next up, I have my psychological factor overview. So there are 4 main topics I'm going to be talking about, and they all go hand in hand, but 2 of them go hand in hand with each other. So starting off with dissociation, suggestibility, and trauma. So those 3 go hand in hand, and what I mean by that is that when we are in a state of disassociation while we are astrally projecting, there are 2 outcomes. There is a bad outcome and there's a good outcome. So what I mean by that is that our dreams are influenced by our everyday life. So if we are in a bad state of mind, we are more likely to have a bad dream, a nightmare. If we are in a good mental health state, we are more likely to have something normal, something more exciting in our dreams, right? So it goes hand in hand with astral projection as well. If you are in a good state of mind, you are more likely to have a better experience astrally projecting. It's more likely to come easier to you, and you don't have to force it out, right? But if you're in a bad state of mind and you force it out, that's when it gets tricky. That's when I come to sleep paralysis, right? So sleep paralysis, like I said before, that is when your brain is not conscious that you are awake, but your body is conscious. You can't move because your brain has set those skeletal inhibitors to a pause. So it doesn't go vice versa. Your body needs your brain to function. Your brain doesn't need your body to function, right? So when it comes to that, sleep paralysis is sort of a way of your brain not knowing that you are awake, right? So anyone who's had sleep paralysis knows that it feels like a weight pushing down on you. It's constantly pushing down. You can't move. You can't get up, right? But then your brain's hallucinating again, right? Which goes backtracking to what I said. Your brain's always hallucinating. It's a belief machine, right? So now that your brain is hallucinating and your body's frozen, you're seeing things. It feels like you're actually seeing things, right? Like it feels like you're seeing an entity, a demon, or anything that your brain's constantly hallucinating at that point, right? So when it comes to lucid dreaming means that your brain is fully conscious of what you were doing in that dream, but your body isn't. Because your body is still in that set state of paralysis, right? Because lucid dreaming is still another type of dreaming. It's not astrally projecting, but lucid dreaming is to the point where you are fully in control of what you were doing in your dreams, right? You can do anything you want in your dreams, talk to whoever you want, go anywhere you want, right? But that goes with experience. So like I said, there's levels. There's dreaming, lucid dreaming, astrally projecting, right? So if you were experienced in lucid dreaming, that's when you can fully go to the next tier, which is astral projection, right? So next up, I have the dissociation theory, and Bessel van der Kolk says that dissociation is not disconnection, it's just self-protection. So what he means by that is that if you are not properly astrally projecting or lucid dreaming the first time you're trying it, that means that's your body's way of saying that you're not ready, right? Because like I said before, if you do it wrong, it's very dangerous, right? You are more likely to encounter sleep paralysis. You're more likely to encounter more mental and psychological problems while you are in that set state of REM, because that's when your brain is functioning at the highest state. The hallucinations are always at the top level. Right? So next up, I have the lucid dreaming link to astral projection. So basically what I'm trying to say is that lucid dreaming overlaps with your out-of-body experience, right? So it's your awareness in that altered state of mind. Because when you are lucid dreaming, you are not in your set state of mind. You're not in the real world. You're in your mind's world, right? So that overlaps with you astrally projecting, because you have to be able to lucid dream first and to be able to astral project. It's directly correlated, right? So that goes to say that if you have a higher dream recall, you're more likely to have a natural high out-of-body experience, a good experience. But that likewise, if you have a bad dream recall, if you're facing trauma, PTSD, or any type of psychological, neurological problem, you are more likely to have a worse experience in that out-of-body experience. Your soul is more likely to not successfully detach from your body. It's more likely to sort of detach, attach, and you're in that sensitive paralysis, right? And studies show that less than half, so 43% of lucid dreamers reported out-of-body experiences. So that goes to show that less than half of people who have been able to actually project have been experienced in lucid dreaming first. But that also goes to say that the other half, the more than half, are not experienced enough to actually project to that level. So next up I have sleep paralysis and hypnagogia. So a hypnagogic state is a state between wakefulness and sleep. So what I mean by that is that your brain doesn't know that you're awake. It thinks you're still asleep, which is why it's constantly hallucinating. But your body knows you're awake, but you can't move because your inhibitors are frozen, right? So it's a simple equation, right? So people who have paralysis or sleep paralysis usually panic, right? Because that's like the basic outcome of sleep paralysis. You can't move, you're awake, but you can't move. You're stuck, right? But then you also have hallucinations. So those go hand in hand, and then that makes a misinterpreted soul separation. So like I said before, you will not be able to fully separate your soul from your body if you were doing both those things at the same time, if you were facing both of those things at the same time, right? And Dr. Sharpless states that sleep paralysis is nature's experiment in disembodiment. So what he means by that is that sleep paralysis, if you get it, that is sort of your body's way of saying, and nature's way of saying that you are not ready, right? Because even though it's spiritual comes with maturity, right? So the more spiritually mature you are, the more likely you are to have these set experiences, these unique experiences, right? But the less spiritually matured you are, the less likely you are. It's all of this is directly correlated. So some limitations of mine were that it's a small sample size, and like all these experiences are self-reported and they're subjective, right? We don't have the technology today in today's world to be able to know what is going on in that state of sleep paralysis or astral projection, right? So we don't have that, and with the small sample size, that makes it even less likely for us to be able to record what's going on in their brains, what activity is going on in their brains while they are going through this experience, and why this is happening, how this is able to happen. So some counterclaims Dr. Newberg states is that just because something feels spiritual doesn't mean it's biological, right? So how many of you guys have opened up a textbook, a biology textbook, and read, oh, you can separate your soul from your body? Nobody, right? Because it's not biological. This is all a spiritual thing. None of this is biological. This is supposed to be biologically possible because you are a living thing, but nobody has studied the soul, and nobody can know what the soul really is, because you are technically in a different realm. You are in the astral plane realm. So that realm hasn't been studied, because nobody has done it to a point that they are able to research enough about that realm to know what it really is and how it really works. So some implications I can recommend is, so all these are connected. So people who usually have bad experiences and are trauma survivors, right? Let's say from the military or any sort of PTSD that they may have had in the past, right? So I think that therapy can really help them, and this may help treat their sleep paralysis, right? Because sleep paralysis only occurs if you are severely sleep deprived, or you have had severe PTSD, which is why you have nightmares, or your brain's constantly hallucinating at that moment, that specific moment where you had that sort of certain trauma, right? And then, so all of this could inspire brain and mind spirituality, and we can integrate that into how people live their day-to-day life in the real world. So some future research I could recommend is that we can use virtual reality to replicate what the person is seeing in their out-of-body experiences in a lab possibly. So what I mean by that is that the person who has had that experience, right, scientists or not, it can be a regular person, they can go into a lab and they can sort of just explain to the scientist who is implicating all of this and describe to them what happened, what it felt like, what it really feels like, what it looks like, what it really is like, right? And then we can also use larger neuroimaging studies. So what I mean by that is that once we have the technology to unlock the neurological imaging of the brain scans, what is going on during their astral projection or out-of-body experience, if we can unlock that to a point, I think that that could really help us benefit, help us understand what's going on in that state of out-of-body experience, right? And we can also explore like cross-culture experiences, right? So far, it's only limited to random people, but in different cultures believe different things, right? So, for example, Hinduism believes about something else, Christianity believes something else. They contradict, right? So what I think is that we can take all their cultural experiences into one, get connecting points, and we can really figure out what the similarities are between all of their experiences, and we can get a good understanding of what's going on. So my conclusion is from Dr. Sharp, and that states that the causes of travel may be no further than the folds of our own mind. And what he means by that is that we can't go anywhere past what we set our mind to. So whatever we set our mind to is the limit we've reached in the end.
Okay, my question for you is, hold on, I lost my question. Okay, what was one obstacle or challenge you encountered while implementing your research method, and how did you address it?
Right. So one obstacle I encountered was so I looked off, most of my sources were from Google Scholar, a trustable and credible site, but my challenge was that I wasn't sure how much of it was truly credible, because like I said before, it's all a subjective experience. No one really knows what's going on until they've experienced it themselves, which is hard to grasp because you don't know which one is more trustable than the other. Because so one thing I took into account was their similarities, like I said before, right? So if they have similar experiences, then I know that it's true. But my main obstacle was the subjectivity of the person's experience.
Okay, Addie. If you could have one ideal audience member to be present here for your presentation that you feel would benefit the most from listening to your presentation, who would that be and why? It can be someone by name, job title, profession, if you don't know someone specific.
So one person I have here is my friend Grace Garvey. I was talking to her the other night, and I was explaining to her my research, and she said that she had a similar experience, and she explained her experience to me, right? And her experience went hand in hand to my research. So I'd like to have her present because her experience went hand in hand with my experience, and I think that what I was explaining could have helped her understand to a better level of what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay. If you had 3 more weeks to work on this research project, what additional research strategies or methods would you put into practice?
So another research method I would put into practice is going up to more spiritual centers and really understanding from people who have experienced this firsthand and having a one-to-one conversation with them and understanding what happens, what they're feeling, what they're going through, and what it looks like to get a better grasp, and so I can implement that into my research and really show that it goes hand in hand with what I'm saying.
Okay. Any questions at all?
Yep. One, in listening to you describe sleep paralysis, my question is, does it only occur with nightmares, or can sleep paralysis, the disconnection between not being able to move and not realizing you're asleep, happen with positive dreaming or hallucination?
So it can happen with anything. So if you are generally sleep deprived, not for a bad reason, but also for if you're studying for a test, for example, it can happen because your brain, when you're sleep deprived, is hallucinating, right? It's always hallucinating, right? So those hallucinations come with when your skeletal inhibitors are paused. So that's just an experience that you can have between that then and also a bad experience that you can have between sleep paralysis.
I have another question. Okay. Can a person move through the hierarchy of the steps that you described without purposely doing it? Can it be something that just occurs as they live their life?
So it can be something so it's both. So if a person is in a good mental state and they're spiritually mature, then of course they're gonna unlock it by themselves, right? They already know about that.
But without actually recognizing they're
that's what I'm
doing
getting
it.
to. So if they unintentionally do it, that means that they're already mentally mature, they're spiritually mature. So it goes hand in hand. So you have to be spiritually mature, not mentally mature, but also spiritually mature to be able to do that. Because you can be mentally immature, but you can still be at a high level at spirituality and still be able to unlock that. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Any other questions on that?